puzzling story out of Savannah tonight. A lineman who came to the area to help after Hurricane Helene dying under bizarre circumstances. His family still searching for answers. WTOC investigates Shay Schrader has been looking into the case. Shay, what have you found out?
Dawn, medical records and patchwork accounts of Combs' last few days paint a concerning picture. His family believes that something had to happen to put Combs into the fragile mental state that ultimately led to his death at the age of 24. September 27, 2024. Hurricane Helene makes landfall in Georgia, devastating local communities and knocking out power for 1.5 million people.
And that is the question for a lot of people in Chatham County and across our region, is when the power will come back on.
Enter 20,000 linemen, including locals and people who were contracted from out of state, like John Combs.
You like the fact that, when he flipped that switch on and all the power went on, and and knowing that, otherwise some of these people would be out of power for quite a long time.
Combs' father, Chris, says John traveled to Georgia the day before Helene made landfall, jumping into action as soon as the storm passed. But his father says he didn't realize the last time he would see his son would be when he sent him to Savannah.
I took him into O'Hare and dropped him off, and he came home in a box.
To this day, Combs says he doesn't really know what happened leading up to his son's death. On October 1st, Combs was working to restore power on Wilmington Island. The next day, October 2nd, he went to Memorial Hospital in Savannah, complaining of, quote, altered mental status. On October 3rd, he rented a car, drove to Atlanta, and he tried to fly back home to Illinois. He wasn't allowed on his flight after displaying erratic behavior during the boarding process. On October 4th, he was found dead after being hit by a train in Montgomery, Alabama. What do you think happened?
Electrocution, head injury, or some sort of drugging. He was perfectly fine during the day, and then all of a sudden, this comes on.
Combs says his son had no prior history of mental health issues and was completely fine in the months and days leading up to the trip to Savannah. He says when he's pressed John's company, Red Rover Electric, about what happened, they say if something happened to John, it was while he was alone. I called Red Rover Electric, and their owner, Nick Snyder, hung up on me. I was, however, able to reach a foreman on the project who says the crew was in the area of the golf course on Wilmington Island when John started behaving strangely. I asked the Wilmington Island community in this Facebook post if anyone had heard anything about John Combs or seen anything out of the ordinary involving linemen in the aftermath of Helene. Keep in mind, I don't say in the post that I was specifically interested in the area of the golf course on October 1st. Amber Powell, a Wilmington Island native, reached out, saying she had seen something right next to the golf course on the same day Combs would have been working in the area.
He was up in his bucket, he was working, there was no one down here.
Powell says she and her fiance were driving down Wilmington Island Road that day, and she was looking at the power lines because of the condition they were in. She noticed a young white man, alone, working on a line, and then, several poles down,
I don't know if you'd call it an explosion, but it looked like a firework coming from the pole.
Powell says sparks rained down on her car and the noise it made was very loud. Immediate concern set in for the lineman she had seen.
As soon as it happened, I turned and looked back at the bucket. I was like, is he okay?
Powell says the truck she saw parked next to the lineman, which didn't belong to a local power company, looked empty. She believes the lineman was alone. The foreman I reached by phone says Red Rover Electric's crews would not have been working alone. On October 2nd, Combs checked himself into Memorial Hospital. His medical records, which his father provided, show he had become, quote, suddenly disoriented and confused, and that he felt, quote, tingling of both arms and legs. The file also notes Combs denied, quote, any recent traumatic injuries. He was admitted for treatment, but left the hospital in the middle of the night, saying he had to go to work.
Which to me should have been a big red flag that, this guy, there's no way this guy's going to work.
From there, Combs rented a car and drove to Atlanta, where he attempted to catch a Southwest flight back to Illinois.
That's when he gave a speech in the airport. And then he was removed from the boarding process and then found dead in Montgomery, Alabama, a little over 24 hours later.
John's father ended up in Alabama after getting a text message from his son saying he was, quote, in the woods. John also sent his brother his GPS location. The Montgomery Police Department says John's body was found around 6:40 p.m. on October 4th after being hit by a train. His death remains under investigation. Despite being in Montgomery, John's father didn't find out about his death until 3 days later. He says the most frustrating part of the situation is the lack of answers, and he feels that despite his son's effort to help the people of Savannah following a devastating disaster, he hasn't gotten any help of his own.
You guys were so grateful for the lineman that came down to restore power in Savannah area. Do you know about the one that didn't make it home?
We have reached out to the Occupational Health and Safety Administration about this story. They told us that they had looked into it after receiving an informal complaint and that there is, quote, no information to suggest that the death was work-related or that workers were exposed to hazardous working conditions. I also reached out to the Savannah Police Department and the Chatham County Police Department to see if they have any involvement in the case. Neither department had any records relating to John Combs. The Montgomery Police Department did not give any updates when we asked, saying the investigation into Combs' death is ongoing. Shay Schrader, WTOC Investigates.